For a second morning running, the southern Israeli city of Beersheba struck by an Iranian ballistic missile. 5 people suffered minor injuries and were taken to the local hospital, itself damaged in yesterday's strike. Israel's missile defences have shielded the country from much of the incoming from Iran, but they aren't impermeable. The military says it prevented a larger planned attack on Beersheba by targeting 3 Iranian ballistic missile launches and what it said was a military commander near a launch site.
We have many targets to strike. We have been preparing for the length of this operation. As we deepen our strikes, we allow ourselves to continue this operation for longer. We will continue to do that until we achieve all goals of the operation.
Tehran once again coming under fire overnight. Israel saying 60 warplanes dropped 120 bombs, targeting missile production sites and one facility involved in Iran's nuclear program. Iran's foreign minister saying Tehran will not negotiate while under attack.
It is the Americans who are seeking negotiations. They have sent messages multiple times, including very serious ones. But we have explicitly told them that as long as the aggression and attacks continue, there is simply no room for talk of dialogue or diplomacy. We are in a legitimate state of self-defense.
He is, though, preparing to meet European foreign ministers who've gathered in Geneva today, while the French president is repeating calls for a negotiated end to the fighting.
1. Nothing justifies strikes on energy infrastructure and civilian populations. Nothing. And 2. We absolutely must prioritise a return to substantive negotiations that include the nuclear issue, moving towards zero enrichment, ballistics, and limiting Iranian activities and capabilities, and the financing of all the terrorist groups destabilising the region.
The crucial decision remains President Trump's, whether to join Israel in attacking Iran. In particular, whether to use America's so-called massive ordnance penetrator bombs on the subterranean nuclear site at Fordo.
I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks."
But is that a firm deadline from a commander-in-chief contemplating the grave decision of committing America to a new war, or a go-to rhetorical device? In short, what exactly is a Donald Trump fortnight?
Since his first time in office, President Trump has often relied on a 2-week metric, promising big answers, tough solutions, new policies, and even decisions on some of those pressing issues.
You trust President Putin? You know, in about 2 weeks.
In your mind, is Ukraine doing enough to get this?
I'd rather tell you in about 2 weeks from now.
Do you still believe that Putin actually wants to end the war?
I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. Over the next 2-3 weeks. In about 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. In 2 weeks.
You'll be hearing about it a lot more in the next 2 weeks. Maybe in 100 years from now, maybe in 2 weeks.
Iran state TV this morning releasing new images of ballistic missile launches. One consideration for Trump, possible strikes on US troops in the region. Another one, increasingly public divisions within his own political base, promised an end to military interventions far from home. In Israel, despite the damage and death being dealt by Iranian strikes, there is still overwhelming public support for military action. And if the Prime Minister is disappointed by Trump's 2-week delay, he's not showing it, telling an interviewer last night it's up to the US President to do what's in the interests of his country, while he acts in Israel's interests.
Our primary objective is to stop the nuclear program and remove it as a threat. The second goal is to halt the advancement of ballistic capabilities, also to remove it as a threat. In the process, it's clear the regime is destabilizing. We're also hitting government-related targets and centers of power. You've seen this with the broadcast center, and there's more to come. But the matter of regime change is, first and foremost, up to the Iranian people.
In the context of this first week of war, the last 24 hours have been relatively quiet. Tehran's streets this morning, markedly so. But Israel is talking of more targets deeper strikes, Iran promising to fight back, not negotiate under fire. Few illusions then that this is yet close to coming to an end. Well, joining me now is Sir Richard Dalton, a former UK ambassador to Tehran. Sir Richard, thank you very much for joining us. We have the Iranian foreign minister heading to Geneva today to talk to his European counterparts. Where do you put the current Iranian position?
I think that there is scope to go back to what Witkoff and Aragche in their previous discussions had initialed, namely for Iran to revert to the very highest levels of transparency ever imposed on any member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Second, to remove through export or dilution all the controversial stocks of uranium enriched to 60% and to commit either to a suspension of all enrichment while negotiations on a long-term agreement continue. So I think it's possible to see the war ending with a first stage agreement that builds on those elements. And we have to see how rigid Israel and the United States are likely to be.
And into that calculation comes this idea of a 2-week delay that Donald Trump has imposed on the whole process, saying that he wants that length of time to decide whether or not to use US military force. Where does that leave Iran? Where does that leave the process, in your view?
Well, one should mention first the significant doubts in military circles that in the United States that even their weaponry is able to destroy the Fordo plant. This is the one that's buried under scores of meters of rock, and which is a serious worry for those who think that Iran might one day take a decision to develop a nuclear weapon. So maybe President Trump has realized what the rest of us knew, that a diplomatic agreement in which Iran willingly reverts to measures which give the world an assurance that it will never have a nuclear weapon and that there is a negligible risk of diversion of nuclear materials to military purposes. Maybe he is moving in that direction. If so, we could be optimistic. If not, and he's insisting on absolutely no nuclear enrichment for civil purposes inside Iran, we may have a problem. We don't know how inflexible the supreme leader of Iran will be. There is a point beyond which it is politically untenable in Iran for him to concede.
As far as the Israelis are concerned, there is this talk from a number of military analysts, former generals and intelligence officials saying, look, nothing could be worse than the current regime in Iran. So whatever happens, if it were to be collapsed, would be a good thing. As someone who served, I believe, in the region at the height of the aftermath of the Iraq invasion, there will be people worried that what comes after the current Iranian regime could be potentially considerably worse, or at least extremely destabilizing for the region.
Our experience in Iraq and Afghanistan shows that wars don't solve internal problems. You have to work with the grain of the people of that country. And the prediction that the more likely outcome of a collapse of the regime would be chaos, emigration, impoverishment, the emergence of new extremist Islamist movements, that prediction seems to me much more likely than the idea of an orderly takeover by somebody whom we can't really imagine as being benign at this stage.
If Donald Trump were to order a US military action, could that pull in a British government that so far has been calling for de-escalation? What kind of position would that put Keir Starmer and his ministers in?
The decision as to whether to become a belligerent is a very serious one. If our bases are used, we've joined in a war against Iran, we would expect to be in receipt of retaliation for that. Our facilities, our people in the embassies, in military bases, such as they are in the region, would be held at risk. And for what benefit? Zero, I would suggest.
All right, Sir Richard Dalton, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.